회복도 성장도 결국은 이 땅의 주인인 국민의 행복을 위한 것입니다. 모든 국가 역량이 국민을 위해 온전히 쓰여지는 진정한 민주공화국을 만듭시다. 작은 차이를 넘어 서로를 인정하고 존중하며 국민이 주인인 나라, 국민이 행복한 나라, 진짜 대한민국을 향해 함께 나아갑시다.
Welcome to the globalists. Welcome to the globalists. Welcome to the globalists. We're in a new set, a brand new set.
I am a globalist. And I'm the globalist.
And I'm the globalist who wants to bring Jang right into your kitchen.
President Lee Jae-myung has held his first cabinet meeting where he ordered the Oceans Ministry to be swiftly relocated to the southeastern city of Busan. Present at the meeting were cabinet members from the previous administration. Following twists and turns, South Korea and the Czech Republic finally signed a major nuclear plant deal after a Czech court lifted an injunction requested by a rival French firm. Korea's economy from January to March fell 0.2% from the previous quarter amid weakening demand at home. It's June 5th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. On his second day in office, President Lee Jae-myung held a cabinet meeting. His orders included ways to better deal with wildfires, as well as moving the Oceans Ministry to Busan as soon as possible. Kim Do-yeon has more.
It was the first cabinet meeting for President Lee Jae-myung on Thursday, and it lasted well over the scheduled time for 4 hours. And, quote, awkwardness ensued for those hours as President Lee discussed state matters with the cabinet who were appointed by impeached former President Yoon.
또 여러분들이 가진 고난, 또 책임도 한순간도 소홀히 할 수 없지 않습니까? 그래서 오늘은 각 부처 단위로 현재 현안들 한번 체크를 한번 해보고 싶어요. 좀 어색하고 그러긴 하지만 그래도 최선을 다해 주시기 바랍니다.
This is a rare occasion as President Lee doesn't get a transition period and assume the role first before shaping his own cabinet. The president and the cabinet ended up having kimbap for lunch at the meetings as it ran until his next meeting at 2 p.m. After listening, he ordered a number of things to the cabinet. One was reviewing whether to add additional helicopters for wildfire response. Another was preparing to move the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries to the port city of Busan as fast as possible. Meanwhile, the top office also says that most of the top office employees from the previous administration who had left came back to their posts.
Most of the former presidential office staff have returned to work, and the foundations to gradually resume operations are being laid. Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Eun-sik is scheduled to communicate with the staff regarding work-related matters during a staff meeting at the presidential office on Sunday, the 8th.
President Lee also held a meeting for public safety at the National Security Council's conference room. He emphasized the importance of public safety, wearing the yellow emergency response jacket for the first time as the president, and meeting with local government officials on accident prevention. Meanwhile, the top office also said that the president has canceled 2 constitutional court justice nominations made by former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, claiming it was out of his authority. One was Lee Wan-gyu, who also served as the Minister of Government Legislation under President Yoon, and the other was Han Sang-hun. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meantime, the Democratic Party passed contentious special investigation bills this afternoon at a plenary session, including a special probe bill into insurrection charges, amid a boycott by the People Power Party. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Back in power after 3 years, the ruling Democratic Party of Korea, which holds a majority in the 22nd National Assembly, is now speeding up efforts to pass contentious bills previously vetoed by the former administration. The ruling party on Thursday unilaterally passed a special investigation bill into the death of a Marine during flood rescue operations in 2023, which had been passed by the Assembly 3 times but then vetoed by the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. Of the 198 votes cast, 194 lawmakers voted in favor, while 3 abstained amid a boycott by the People Power Party. The same day, the Assembly also passed a bill calling for a special investigation into former President Yoon's declaration of martial law last December and the related insurrection charges. A similar special prop bill had been previously passed twice, but was also vetoed.
A quick and thorough investigation under a special counsel is needed to hold those responsible accountable and prevent another coup attempt like the one on December 3rd. The public strongly supports the passage of the special counsel bill.
A bill calling for a special counsel probe into former First Lady Kim Gun-hee over allegations of election fraud involving political broker Myung Tae-gyun was also passed during Thursday's plenary session. The Assembly also approved a separate bill that gives the Justice Minister, alongside the Prosecutor General, the authority to directly request disciplinary action against prosecutors. Of the 202 votes cast, 185 lawmakers voted in favor, while 18 voted against it. Most lawmakers from the PPP boycotted the vote, criticizing the DP for pushing the bills through unilaterally without bipartisan support.
Today's bills don't reflect President Lee Jae-myung's first promise of unity. It's disappointing that the focus isn't on helping people's lives. This bill is just a revenge move. Punishing those who investigated President Lee by holding hearings to shame them and trying to impeach them is like attacking the justice system.
Meanwhile, ahead of Thursday's vote, Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik said that as the Lee administration begins, respecting and cooperating with the parliament is essential for national unity and a successful government, urging the new government to keep this in mind. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
The start of a new government means it has a lot on its plate. At the top of its agenda is the economy, with a focus on trade and boosting consumption at home. For more on this, our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin is here. Sujin, to start off, how has the economy responded to the new administration?
Right, so it's been just 2 days since the election, but the new Lee administration is already moving to revive the economy. The stock market is also showing signs of stabilizing, with the benchmark Kospi during intraday trading on Thursday climbing into the 2,820 range for the first time in 10 months. The rise was largely driven by foreign investors, with Lee's presidential election when ending a leadership vacuum. He has also vowed to prioritize the economy, signing his first executive order to launch the Emergency Economic Evaluation Task Force, which also held its inaugural meeting on the same day. And the two key agendas that the government and the task force are expected to tackle are boosting domestic demand and navigating high-stakes negotiations with the Trump administration. While it's still unclear who will take on the dual role of finance minister and deputy prime minister to lead the economic task force, both seasoned bureaucrats and political figures are being floated. One such figure being mentioned is Yoon, a veteran economic bureaucrat who previously served as a budget director and vice minister at the finance ministry, and a politician that's also reportedly being considered is veteran lawmaker Kim Tae-yeon, a 5-term politician and former floor leader of the DP who currently serves on the National Assembly's Strategy and Finance Committee.
And how is the new government and the task force aiming to boost domestic demand?
Right, so one major way that the newly established task force is expected to boost domestic demand is to pass a large-scale second supplementary government budget, and expected to amount to at least 30 trillion won, or around 22 billion US dollars. The ruling DP is reportedly aiming to finalize the budget plan this month with hopes of passing it in the National Assembly, which it has a majority in, as early as next month. The Finance Ministry said it held a meeting with officials from each government ministry on Thursday morning, focused on the upcoming second supplementary budget as a follow-up to Lee's Emergency Economic Task Force meeting the night before. And a key part of the second supplementary budget is expected to be government-issued local vouchers.
During downturns like this, when small businesses are struggling, local vouchers may not be a long-term fix, but can still provide a boost for at least 6 months.
Now, what's the plan for tariff talks with the U.S.?
Right, so when he formally took office on Wednesday, as South Korea's 21st president, he also took over the responsibility for ongoing tariff negotiations with the Trump administration. South Korea has been in high-stakes negotiations aiming to remove or reduce tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. On April 24th, Korea and the U.S. held high-level trade talks where the two countries agreed to reach a comprehensive agreement dubbed the July Package by July 8th, the day that the 90-day pause on Trump's reciprocal tariff rates on foreign nations is set to expire. At the task force first meeting Wednesday night, Trade Minister Chung In-gyo briefed the president on recent U.S. demands, which include easing non-tariff barriers such as lowering import restrictions on American beef over 30 months old. But there are key areas that the government may be able to leverage in future negotiations without Korea having to lower non-tariff barriers. Let's take a listen.
Moving forward, if Korea and the U.S. expand cooperation in shipbuilding and other technology and industrial sectors, it could serve as a kind of channel to broaden discussion into other areas, leading to favorable negotiations. Additionally, options such as increasing import of U.S. energy, investment in the U.S., and joining Alaska's LNG project could also serve as potential cards in the discussions.
But as mentioned earlier, the biggest question is who President Lee will appoint to the dual role of finance minister and deputy prime minister, as he or she will be a key figure to lead the task force and steer the country's economic recovery.
All right, we'll have to say thanks for the report.
Thank you for having me.
The local economy shrank in the first quarter of this year due to weak domestic demand and increasing uncertainties over Trump tariffs. Officials, though, expect a turnaround the economy in the second quarter. Moon Ji-young has the details.
South Korea's economy contracted in the first quarter of 2025 compared to the previous quarter amid domestic and international economic uncertainties. Preliminary data from the Bank of Korea released Thursday show that the country's gross domestic product from January to March shrank by 0.2% on quarter, unchanged from an estimate in April. It marked a decline in GDP following 2 consecutive quarters of positive growth. The Bank of Korea explained that weak domestic demand was a primary factor in the downturn. Looking closer of the total decline, domestic demand contributed negative 0.5 percentage points, while net exports boosted the growth rate by 0.2 percentage points. Imports were down 1.1%, with crude oil and natural gas among items contributing to the drop. Exports declined by 0.6% due to lower shipments of chemicals, machinery, and equipment. Facility investment dropped by 0.4%, marking its weakest performance since the first quarter of 2024. While construction investment declined by 3.1%, private spending also saw a decline of 0.1%, driven by weakening demand for services. According to an official from the Bank of Korea, domestic demand is likely to improve in the second quarter.
The impact of U.S. tariff policies is beginning to show in sectors like automobiles and steel, and with these policies expected to expand further, exports may be negatively affected. However, overall, there are signs of improvement in domestic demand indicators.
He also said that while construction, food service, and accommodation remained sluggish, there were improvements in the consumption of durable and non-durable goods, production in the wholesale and retail sectors, and facility investment compared to the first quarter. Meanwhile, the country's gross national income per capita advanced 1.5% in 2024 compared to the previous year, exceeding the earlier estimate of 1.2% made in March. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Following twists and turns, Korea has signed a nuclear project deal with the Czech Republic after a Czech court lifted an injunction requested by a rival French firm. It's the first major nuclear plant deal to be signed in 16 years. An Song-jin tells us more.
The nuclear plant deal between the Czech Republic and South Korea has finally been sealed. Representatives from the Dukovany 2 power plant and the Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power on Wednesday signed final contracts to build 2 new nuclear power reactors in the Czech Republic. Czech Prime Minister Petra Fiala said on the same day all doubts and legal obstacles that prevented the nuclear power plant project from being launched had been removed. The signing of the deal came only hours after the Czech High Court lifted an injunction barring the deal from closing. The 2 parties were originally to sign the contract on May 7th until the losing bidder EDF of France had filed for and won an injunction, delaying the project's timeline. However, Dukovany and KHNP appealed the ruling and the court declared that the injunction was unverifiable. The $18.6 billion deal will result in the expansion of the Dukovany nuclear site with the construction of 2 1,000-megawatt units, with the first to be completed by 2036. This deal is the first such project for KHNP in Europe and the company's first overseas project since a deal made with the UAE in 2009. According to pundits, the deal proves South Korea's technical skills and economic feasibility for nuclear plants, while they also say it could be a turning point for Seoul's nuclear plant expansion into the European market. An Song-jin, Arirang News.
North Korea reported Lee Jae-myung's election victory here in the south, a day after he was officially declared president, with no commentary. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil has this report.
A day after President Lee Jae-myung was sworn into office, North Korea reported on the election. North Korea's official newspaper, the Rodong-sinmun, briefly reported the South's presidential election result on Thursday, saying that the vote took place on June 3rd, 2 months after Yoon's impeachment, which it called the December 3rd martial law incident. There was no commentary, no criticism. But analysts say what Pyongyang didn't say might be just as telling.
Despite declaring the South an enemy state and cutting all ties, the North reported the election result just a day after. This quick response may be a subtle sign that Pyongyang is closely watching developments in the South, even as it maintains its posture of disengagement.
In the past, North Korea took more time to respond, waiting 3 days after the 2017 election and 2 days in 2022. On those occasions as well, Pyongyang offered only short, factual summaries with no analysis. This time, a senior official at South Korea's Unification Ministry pointed to a subtle shift in language. Instead of using South Choson, a term often associated with a shared Korean identity, Pyongyang referred to the South as South Korea. Experts say the change could reflect Pyongyang's strategy of maintaining distance from the South, a pattern seen in recent years. Whether it signals an opening or just a more deliberate kind of silence remains to be seen. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has today confirmed the rescue of 4 North Koreans who last week drifted across the maritime border in the East Sea. Military officials say the group, who are currently in custody, crossed the northern limit line last week in a wooden boat, reportedly claiming they wish to return to the north. Regarding the incident, Seoul's Ministry of Unification said a further investigation is currently ongoing. The ministry added that if the group wishes to return, it'll arrange their swift repatriation on humanitarian grounds. A similar case unfolded in March in the West Sea, when 2 North Koreans also crossed the NLL. They asked to be sent back, but despite repeated outreach, Pyongyang has yet to respond. U.S. President Trump has announced a new travel ban affecting 12 countries, including Iran. Meantime, he signed an order restricting foreign student visas for Harvard following campus protests against the Gaza war. Yeong has more.
President Trump announced on Wednesday that citizens of 12 countries will be banned from visiting the United States. Trump ties the new ban to Sunday's terror attack in Boulder, Colorado.
The recent terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, has underscored the extreme dangers posed to our country by the entry of foreign nationals who are not properly vetted, as well as those who come here as temporary visitors and overstay their visas. We don't want them.
The new ban omits North Korea, but applies to 12 other countries. Additional restrictions will be imposed on visitors from 7 countries. AP News described the move as the resurrection of a policy from Trump's first term in 2017 that barred entry from several Muslim-majority countries. That original ban, later repealed by the Biden administration in 2021, affected nationals from Iraq, Syria, Iran, Sudan, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen, as well as North Korea and some Venezuelan officials. The announcement follows a January executive order requiring U.S. agencies to assess which countries pose a national security risk or demonstrate hostile attitudes toward the U.S., laying the groundwork for renewed travel restrictions. Also on Wednesday, Trump signed a proclamation restricting foreign student visas for Harvard University. The proclamation blocks entry into the U.S. of any new Harvard students holding student visas and instructs the Secretary of State to review and potentially revoke those already issued. Trump declared in an executive order that it would jeopardize national security to allow Harvard to continue hosting foreign students on its campus. This marks the latest escalation in the administration's standoff with Harvard, which has resisted calls for sweeping reforms it says would undermine institutional autonomy. The administration has already slashed research funding and directed federal agencies to sever ties with the school. Yeong, Arirang News.
Temperatures stayed above 25 degrees Celsius in most parts of the country during the day. In the Gyeongsangdo provinces, Gumi and Kimcheon, it was around 30 degrees Celsius. As such, the gap between daily highs and lows widens to around 20 degrees. A light jacket is necessary when you go outside in the evening. You should prepare for the heat in advance. On Friday, Memorial Day, the daytime temperature in Seoul will move up to 28 degrees and the summer heat will come around. The ultraviolet index will soar to a very high level across the country. In addition, ozone concentrations will increase in some areas, including the Seoul metropolitan area. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Busan will start off at 18 degrees, Daegu at 16 degrees. Highs will move up to 28 degrees in Seoul and Gwangju, 29 degrees in Chuncheon and Daejeon. Frequent rain is forecast for Jeju Island for the next few days. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that is Newscenter for tonight. Before we wrap up, we'd like to share with you some changes. Starting next week, my colleague Kim Da-mi will be taking over as the new anchor. It's been a privilege to sit behind this anchor desk for the past 2.5 years, sharing critical stories with you. I'll be around as a correspondent, reporting on stories that matter in our time. That is all from me, and on behalf of our news team, thank you for watching.
난 알 수 없었어 알다시피 그저 널 그리다
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gan. The inauguration of President Lee Jae-myung marks a sharp pivot in South Korea's economic direction. With the economy stalled by weak consumption, global uncertainty, and looming tariff deadlines with the Trump administration, Lee Jae-myung has made household recovery his top priority, launching an emergency task force and fast-tracking a 35 trillion won stimulus to revive local demand. But this isn't just a stopgap spending. His strategy signals a long-term shift to government-led growth with heavy investment in semiconductors, AI, green energy, and defense paired with sweeping labor reforms. All this as the clock ticks toward a July 8th deadline to renegotiate American tariffs. The next few months, will test whether urgency, ambition, and execution can align. For a deeper discussion on this, we connect to Song Soo-young, Professor of Business and Economics at Chungang University. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Chae Sang-mi, Professor of Business Administration at Ewha Women's University. Good to see you again, Professor.
Good evening.
So let's start with the stimulus, Professor Song. So this 35 trillion won supplementary budget, do you think this is enough and well targeted for immediate recovery?
Actually, we have no idea whether this is a perfect target and which would be enough to recover the stagnant Korean economy, because the first quarter recently, the Bank of Korea has announced the year-on-year GDP growth, quarter-on-quarter GDP growth rate has been minus 0.2%. So it is a very emergency situation to recover the economy. And also we have seen that some dwindling, decreased potential growth rate. So to support and recover the potential growth rate, this is a very emergency situation. That's why the newly elected President Lee Jae-myung has emphasized the point of how to address these economic issues, particularly with this 35 trillion won. And overall, 210 trillion won will be invested as to accomplish the pledge made by the President Lee Jae-myung that top 3 AI superpower country and or 3% potential growth rate of GDP, and also top 5 country around the world. This will be a very ambitious goal, but still, I believe that could be reached within 5 years, as long as we have managed to navigate through this difficult situation and in cooperation with not only United States but also the other countries around the world.
So let's assume this spending moves really quickly. Professor Chae, what are the fiscal or inflationary risks that policymakers should be watching?
If the spending hits the economy fast, we will likely see a short-term lift, but there are 2 risks to watch. First, inflation, as you said. While Korea's overall inflation has cooled from its peak, targeted sectors like food, energy, and housing are still under pressure. And injecting demand without increasing supply in those areas could worsen affordability. Second, fiscal sustainability is also we need to watch, because Korea's debt ratio is lower than most of OECD countries, but it's climbing very fast. So if we keep relying on extra budget to solve every problem, future generation will bear the cost. That said, if we treat this stimulus like a bridge supporting people while reforms are underway, it's manageable, but danger, lies in making temporary spending like this feels permanent.
Then President Lee Jae-myung's vision shifts away from the previous administration's market-driven growth to a state-led investment, a stark contrast. Professor Song, is that pivot viable in South Korea's current economic structure?
It is required the pivot of the government policy because, as Professor Choi has mentioned, that the GDP, the government debt level percentage of the GDP is just 50%, and it will be expected to grow 52%. This is considering the other OECD and the developed advanced countries' debt percentage of the GDP is South Korea's the GDP, that's a percentage of GDP, government debt percentage of GDP is too low. So we have a very room to drive the fiscal expansionary policy. And also the good news is because the consumer price index headline inflation has been reduced to 2%. And even though core inflation is a little bit higher, 2.5% or something. And also unemployment rate is very low. Given this situation, I think there is no excuse not to exercise the fiscal expansionary policy. For the monetary policy, the interest rate is 2.75%, the Bank of Korea's basic interest rate for Korea. So it could be even reduced to almost 2%. So the reason is because our economy is stagnant right now. Therefore, even despite this kind of very strong stimulus and the priming pump of the fiscal expansionary policy, the effect on the inflation is relatively very low. That's why and also it is a good time to borrow more money from the people and even issuing some government bonds, or therefore because the interest rate is low. So that is, of course, this is good news, but bad news or the headwind is clearly from the international side, particularly from the United States, pressure on the Korean economy. That is an obstacle to be overcome.
Right, definitely a big task that the Lee administration has to tackle. Now, so under these policies, Professor Choi, public money is to be funneled into strategic sectors like semiconductors and AI. Do you think this can this kind of narrow targeting really drive a broad-based growth?
Focusing on semiconductors and AI make a strategic sense. I think these industries have massive ripple effect because think of AI as a general purpose technology like electricity in the 20th century. It touches healthcare, finance, logistics, education, almost every sector. But here's the challenges. We only support the giants. We risk creating a two-speed economy, like high-tech elite on one side, and everyone else is struggling to catch up. So to drive a broad-based growth, we need policies that link these star sectors to the broader economy. That means investing in digital training, regional innovation hubs, and helping SMEs adopt advanced technology. So yes, it can work, but only with a strong policy bridges, I think.
Right, so these policies would be able to link the narrow sectors into the broad economy. That would be definitely of a big help. Now, the administration is pairing investment with labor-friendly reforms, stronger unions, shorter hours, and extended retirement. Professor Song, do you think this would help enhance or hinder productivity?
Yes, some pundits are concerned about this could be some trade-off relationship because the pro-labor union or pro-labor policy could be some obstacle and barriers to foster the economic growth rate and maybe against some companies. However, the labor reform is necessary to increase the productivity of the labor worker. Simply increase the working hours do not actually improve the quality of the productivity. Clearly, in order to increase the productivity is a very difficult, daunting job. But with the help of AI particularly, the AI should be useful for the small and medium enterprise to reduce some production costs for those small and medium enterprises. So this could help the small and medium enterprise to survive, and they recover the robustness and the strength and in the wake of some adverse economic situation. And that is very useful AI to improve the productivity of the labor and also small and medium enterprise. And then the increment or increase of the working years, so even to 65 years, that has helped increase the participation of the labor workers in the economy. That could also help improve the economic growth rate potential. And then the international situation is, as I mentioned earlier, that is maybe is very difficult to deal with. But anyway, we have to navigate through, and with a very savvy and some shrewd driving to persuade not only the U.S. and also, as well as we have to satisfy the other countries' demand and also collaborate with them. That is balancing is the most important virtue right now for the Lee Jae-myung's government to pursue for the upcoming years.
A complex situation indeed. Now, so with this on the backdrop, Professor Choi, some people say that the government is prioritizing equity more over efficiency. What are your thoughts on this? And also, could you tell us how we should weigh fairness against competitiveness in this low growth era?
Actually, it's a fair concern, but I'd argue the two goals, like equality and efficiency, are not mutually exclusive, especially now. In a low growth world, inequality becomes a drag on growth. I believe if large segments of the population feel left behind, their consumption drops, political divisions rise, and social investment like education suffer. That weakens the whole economy. So fairness isn't just about redistribution, it's about access, like making sure a kid in the countryside can learn AI skills, or a single parent can afford healthcare. Is not charity, it's a smart economics. The challenge is making sure fairness policies doesn't come with excessive red tape or disincentive to work or invest. So it's not equity versus efficiency. The real challenges, I think, is equity with efficiency. And that requires a careful and evidence-based policy, I think. Yeah.
Right, so it's not one or the other, but it should go in parallel together. So one of the most anticipated tasks left for the Lee administration, of course, is tariff negotiations with the Trump administration, of course. Professor Song, at this point, how much leverage do you think South Korea actually have in this compressed timeline?
Before mentioning the leverage that we have in South Korea has, I'd like to mention the first message from White House on the day the newly elected President Lee has been selected, and January 4th, maybe yesterday. And the first message was that they put the pressure to make the South Korean government to offer the best offer for the negotiation. So this is a totally strategic or tactical pressure on the newly elected government. Just one day old baby government must make an offer to the U.S. government about the negotiation of the tariff. So even despite this kind of a bully-like pressure, our government must be patient and persevere, and then wait. And also, I think the first priority should be to make some presidential negotiation or the talking meeting with China and Japan. So in Asian market and in Asia, the Korean government needs to have talk with Japan and China. Then we need to prepare for some tariff negotiation. But so many other countries are in line waiting for some negotiation. Therefore, it means particularly the European unions and also Canada, Mexico, and first country is the United Kingdom has already made some agreement with the United States, but we don't know because the Trump would like to change his mind and then he would like to initiate some renewal of the trade agreement or tariff agreement with even with the UK, and some domestic some control or resistance against the Trump government administration is also another kind of some fortunate leverage for South Korean government to use. Therefore, the best is just patience, and that would be the virtue needed right now.
Right. Well, it definitely feels like Lee Jae-myung has a lot on his plate. Staying with trade, Professor Che, so balancing U.S. trade demands with domestic politics, especially over beef, GMOs, and data exports seems precarious. What could be a smart middle ground at this point?
This is a political minefield. On one side, we have American trade demands that reflects their domestic lobbying, whether it's opening Korea's beef market or easing restriction on GMO product. On the other, we have Korean consumer who care deeply about food safety, digital privacy, and national sovereignty. So the smart middle ground lies in selective accommodation. For example, we could improve labeling transparency for GMOs instead of opening the floodgate. Or we could allow certain data experts under strict privacy protocol using AI to automate compliance. The government should also communicate better with public, showing that concessions are not loose, but trade that secure bigger wins, elsewhere. So this is about diplomatic triage, like give ground where it costs least, hold firm where it matters the most.
Now, finally, we are expecting a cabinet shift with the new government, and it seems to be ongoing. Professor Song, what would you prioritize if you were advising the new economic team?
First of all, I'd like to urge the decrease the interest rate by on Bank of Korea, and another is because the decreased interest rate is just to help the supply. I mean, it reduced the marginal cost or burden of the expenses for the firms and also individuals who are in debt. The other part is to demand-driven economic recovery. Economic recovery is the necessary step because currently the Korea lacks in the consumption and demand, and because of the transient effect of the martial law that was declared in the December 3rd and in 2024. So because people actually shut down their spending and then very concerned about the uncertainty, so political settlement has been achieved. Then the international side problem is actually very difficult to control and maneuver. Therefore, the best one is take time to be prepared for the international issues, but make some prompt response to the domestic economic situation, particularly for about how to recover and increase the demand side. That is the first priority of the government policy that is pursued in the newly elected government.
All right. Professor, thank you so much for your opinion on that. Now, I believe it's time to wrap up our discussion for tonight. Professor Song and Professor Chae, we appreciate your time and your insights. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
나는